Namaskara. Good evening to everybody. My name is Krishna Maryanka. I'm the Youth Service Director for Rotary International District 3190. Welcome to all. I would not like to waste much time so that we can have more questions for Dr. Balu here. But I now request our beloved District Governor for Rotary International District 3190, skyrocketing Rotarian, B.L. Nagendra Prasad, to welcome all and also our guest speaker tonight. Thank you very much. Sir, over to you, DG Nagendra Prasad, sir.
Thank you, Krishna. Our Director, for Youth Service Director, thank you very much. I think today I've arranged excellent speaker, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam. Sir, I would like to tell you that I have met you. I have an office in Mysore. I keep coming, and I had met you during our visit of Kanchi Kamakoti Periyar when he was there. So one of the trips I was there, and I'm an ardent devotee of him, and also I'm managing his temple in Mysore.
Oh, okay. Nice to meet
Yeah, Ram Mandir in Mysore. So in that connection, I had met you once along with our auditor Chandrasekhar. Chandrasekhar, yes. So it's very nice. And I know, I mean, before you read out his biodata, I know much about Balasubramaniam, the way he has sacrificed his life, I would say, for all the people, the downtrodden and staying in remote villages on what not he has done for the social cause. And he's a very great speaker, great experienced person. I know him well. I think for the youth today, what is required is how we go with a positive thought. And I also like to give a quote of our Swami Vivekananda, who always said that, if when you are going in a road, if you don't find any hurdles, then I think you're going in a wrong path. Friends, when we have to go through the rough times, we have to take the challenges and look at the opportunities, what is there beyond the challenges. Then, you get used to this life. Life is always like that. We come across many, many challenges. We need to know how to overcome the challenges and look for opportunities. Youth, I think most of us, we keep talking at home or even outside. ನಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆಲ್ಲಾನು ಈ ಕಷ್ಟ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ, ಚಾಲೆಂಜಸ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ, because they are not used to it. That is what we keep talking to all our children and to our youth. So friends, I think today you're going to have a very great speaker. I welcome him with wholeheartedly on behalf of Rotary 3190. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting this. And I also welcome all our Rotarians and our youth who are here and guests to hear our great speaker, Dr. Balasubramaniam, and I'm sure his motivation and his ideas are going to make us challenging, and he's going to have the whole mindset is going to change for each one of us, and especially at this pandemic time. And sir, for your kind information, the Rotary 3190 or Rotary as such, the whole Rotary family as such in the whole world, they have been fighting this pandemic and doing a lot of services wherever and whatever is possible, each one, and including the Rotary clubs and the Rotary districts. And also I would like to add, sir, that we just recently started a COVID hospital, 300-bed hospital, along with KSRTC and another hospital called Prakriya in Peenya, Bangalore, Peenya. And I think that's one of the good project what the Rotary 3190 has started, along with giving food packets and giving masks, whatever that is possible. We have been doing from past 6 months, and especially this year we started this hospital with a lot of CSR funding and a lot of funding from our own Rotarians. We could start that. And I think with this, I would let us hear to our speaker, more to our speaker. Thank you very much, sir, and I welcome you once again on behalf of Rotary District 3190.
Thank you.
Back to you, Krishna.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. DG, sir, thank you very much. We could not see your video at all, probably because you had logged in from 2 accounts. So unfortunately, we could not see your video, but thank you for talking a little bit about Rotary 3190, the great activities that we are doing even under the COVID situation, thanks to your leadership. I now request our Youth Protection Officer for Rotary International District 3190, my dear friend Shekhar Babu, to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. R. Balasubramaniam. Over to you, Shekhar.
Thank you, Krishna. Good evening to all. ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ, ಶುಭ ಸಂಜೆ. ಇಂದು ನಮ್ಮೊಂದಿಗೆ ಇರುವ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಬಾಲಸುಬ್ರಹ್ಮಣ್ಯ ಅವರನ್ನು ಸಭೆಗೆ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡಲು ತುಂಬಾ ಸಂತೋಷ ಮತ್ತು ಹೆಮ್ಮೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಏಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಸುಮಾರು 27-28 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಅವರ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ನಡೆಸ್ತಿರುವ ಶಾಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ರೋಟರಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ರೈಲಾ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಕರಿತೀವಿ ಆ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನ ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಬಾಲಸುಬ್ರಹ್ಮಣ್ಯಂ, ವೆರಿ ಫಾಂಡ್ಲಿ known as Dr. Balu, is a widely respected development activist, leadership trainer, thinker and a writer. By qualification, Dr. Balu is a physician. He passed out from Mysore Medical College. Right from his childhood, he was very much inspired by one of the greatest leaders which this country saw, Swami Vivekananda. At the age of 19, Dr. Balu founded an organization called SVYM, Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. ಆಗ್ಲೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಡಿ ಜಿ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದಾಗೆ HD ಕೋಟೆ ತಾಲೂಕಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಟ್ರೈಬಲ್ಸ್ನ ಒಳಿತಿಗಾಗಿ ಸುಮಾರು 30 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಹೆಮ್ಮೆ ಪಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಹೆಮ್ಮೆ ಪಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂತ ಕೆಲಸವನ್ನ ಈ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿದೆ. ಅದರ ರೂವಾರಿ ಬಾಲಸುಬ್ರಹ್ಮಣ್ಯ ಅವರಂದ್ರೆ ತಪ್ಪಾಗ್ಲಾರ್ದು. ದೆನ್ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಆ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಬೇರೆ ಭಾಗಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ತನ್ನ ಕಾರ್ಯಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನು ನಡೆಸಿ ಲಕ್ಷಾಂತರ ಜನರಿಗೆ ಸಹಾಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. After spending 3 decades, he pursued academic degrees in leadership, organization development, and public policy. He was the Frank H.D. Rhodes Professor at Cornell University between 2012 and 14. He continues to hold academic positions in Cornell and other universities. His books, Voices from the Grassroots and I the Citizen, are globally acclaimed. ಸರ್, ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಯೂತ್ನ ಅಡ್ರೆಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಬಂದಿರೋದು ನೀವು ತುಂಬಾ ಸಂತೋಷ. ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ಸಮಯ ತಗೊಳ್ದಿರ ಈಗ ನಿಮಗೆ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ ಸರ್. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಕೃಷ್ಣ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಶೇಖರ್. ಸರ್ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.
Namaste. Pleasure being here.
Sir, thank you for coming back to speak to Rotary. Sir, first question ತಮಗೆ 19 ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸೇಷನ್ ಹೇಗೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್? ಸಾಧ್ಯನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಅದು ಅಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷ ಮುಂಚೆ ಇಂಥ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆ ಕಟ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ತಾವು how are you able to do this? What inspired you? Kindly let us know, sir, a little bit about that.
This is a question I keep wishing people don't ask me, but since you asked me, I'll spend some time. I don't think age really is really relevant for us when we think of doing something different. Basically, I've been a non-conformist all my life. I've always done things which others usually prefer not to do or tend to avoid. My journey in this space was complete accident. Typically, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಲು ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಕನ್ನಡ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಭಾವಿಸಬಹುದಾ ಅಥವಾ I have to speak in English?
Sir, speak in mostly in English, sir. Of course, Kannada people are also here. Since we have multilingual participants here, we will focus on it. Of course, Kannada kuda artha agtade janakke. Yes.
Thank you. So, my first, the whole idea of doing something different actually started by an accident, by a very negative incident. I was wanting to join, as usual, like any young Bangalorean, I was born and brought up in Bangalore. So, engineering was either medicine or engineering, a typical middle class dream. I had no aspirations of going into the forest or doing all this. It was simply ಎಷ್ಟು ಬೇಗ ಡಿಗ್ರಿ ಮಾಡಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಬೇಗ ಹೊರದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗೋಣ ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಇರುವಂತ ಕನಸುಗಳೇ ನನಗೂ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು. I will be lying if I say I didn't have those dreams. But then since I tried for the IIT those days and I didn't qualify. So only option I had was to choose. Those days they were called RECs. They were not called NITs as of today. So I thought next best option NIT Surathkal, and I wanted to do computer science. That's when computer science had just come into the country and everybody was talking about it. Few colleges had introduced it. NIT was one of them. REC Surathkal. So I went there. I had 99.67% in my PCM. There was an entrance exam. So 1 mark short of the complete 300. But there's only one seat for general merit, and one of my friends, he had 300 on 300, so he qualified, and I was waitlisted one. Very disappointed, came back to Bangalore. Did not know what to do, so I just thought, ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಕಾಲೇಜ್ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ ಅಂತ BMS ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರಿಂಗ್ ಕಾಲೇಜ್ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡೆ. ಹೋಗಿದ್ ಮೊದಲನೇ ದಿನ was possibly the milestone of my life. I was so badly ragged. Those days there was no anti-ragging act. Ragging was the way you were initiated into academic higher education. And I never had the courage to go back to college the next day. But coming from a middle class family, you don't have money to go sit in a theater. You can't sit at home because your mother would ask you, what are you doing? So I cycled college. I didn't have the courage to enter the college. So I just left the college. On the way back, I saw Basangudi Ramakrishna Ashram. The gates were open. I thought, let me spend a few minutes here, spend some time till I can go back home. So that's what started off as just whiling away my time. And after some time, the monks there and the brahmacharis there noticed me wandering around. They must have been worried that this guy, hangan kadek bandirbeku huduga ankondirbeku. So ಅವ್ರು ತಪ್ಪು ತಿಳ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಲೈಬ್ರರಿಗೆ ಹೋದೆ. ನಾನೇನು ವಿವೇಕಾನಂದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಓದ್ಬಿಡ್ಬೇಕು, ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಓದಬೇಕು ಅಂತಲ್ಲ. To pretend to be serious, I just went and sat in the library. But that 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it became a whole day. I would only leave when the library closed down. The monks were possibly thought a potential candidate for monkhood. And they started talking to me, they started offering me lunch. I started spending a lot of time reading. In those days, the complete works of Swami Vivekananda came in 8 volumes. And I read them like I read any other novel or text or note or any other book, but I never really can say I understood much of it. It was just like reading it. But 2 books changed my life forever, 2 small books. And I think every young man of India should read those books. One is called His Call to the Nation. Another is called To the Youth of India. That changed my life. And sentences like, I do not believe in a God or religion which cannot bring a piece of bread to the orphan's mouth or wipe away the widow's tears. I said, this is the God or religion I want. At 17, I believe everybody is a communist. I was 17 at that time. All of us are communists at 17. We think the world can be equal, everybody can be fair, justice will always prevail. We all live in this fancy world of beliefs at 17. And I was no different. And statements like, I call every young man a traitor who, having been educated at people's expense, cannot pay the least heed to them. Highly inspirational, very touched. And one day, when I was extremely inspired, he talks about go from village to village, go to the fishermen's at the cobbler's group, and how do you serve them and all that. So I felt very inspired. I told myself, if I get an opportunity to do something in life, this is going to be my life. I come home and I found a telegram. I don't even know how many young people here even know what a telegram is. Maybe they have to Google it up to find out. But in our days, that was how communication happened. So I had a telegram saying, join Mysore Medical College immediately.
The telegram we have today is a different one, like your WhatsApp.
I know. I should be careful using that word, Krishna. Right?
Yes, yeah.
And that changed my life, and I came to Mysore to do medicine. I never intended to be a doctor, but I thought this is that, and I do believe that message came to me not from the director of medical education, but I strongly believe it's a message from Swami Vivekananda. And it gave me purpose to life, it gave me meaning to life, and I've continued to discover Vivekananda each day. That's all I will say.
Thank you so much for telling me about how it happened before 20 years. Sir, we will have more questions today than anything else. There are a lot of people who would like to seek your mentorship, a little bit of advocacy, because everybody is struggling for different kinds of answers in this situation. It's not just about COVID-19, even otherwise, in about nation building, in about how to help nation, in about what young people can contribute. Today's topic, that's why it was aptly chosen. Of course, thanks to Shekhar Babu and you. The aspect of alternative models for development for youth. Since, of course, I'll begin with a question that we have from your good friend. I'm sure you know him. It's a senior journalist, Ramakrishna Upadhyay ಅವರು ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್. Senior journalist ಅವರು ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
First book, I the Citizen. So I didn't know Upadhyay was there. Nice to have him here.
ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. He's in the meeting. Sir, ಅವರೊಂದು ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ politicians who have kind of taken the political leadership for their own. They are not allowing anyone else to grow. That being the case, Upadhyay is asking, what are the alternate spaces left for youth leadership? How can youth become leaders in different spaces? Anta ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. Do you have any suggestions? Do youth have to be in politics to lead the country? That's the question we have.
Let me clarify. I think it's an excellent question. It gives me the right space to start off my answer from. I think we need to clarify there's a difference between what people traditionally and intuitively understand as being a leader. Now, I don't even believe in that word leader. The noun form does not exist for me. I think every one of us has the opportunity and the potential to exercise leadership. Exercising leadership is very different from being a leader. Now, leadership, as I believe, the definition of leadership is not connected to power, it's not connected to position, not connected to authority. Obviously, if you have power, authority, and position, you can lead very well. But we all make this mistaken, there's an intuitive understanding, which is a mistake, that if a CEO of a company or the Prime Minister of a country or the Chief Minister of a state are all leaders, I think that's a very wrong understanding. They all have the opportunity to exercise leadership. Some of them do, some of them don't. And you don't have to have position to exercise leadership, nor does it mean that everybody in position exercises leadership. So how would I define leadership? I would like to give two different ways of understanding leadership, both meaning the same, but I'll present it in two different ways. I strongly believe leadership is an activity. It's about doing something. My understanding of leadership comes from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Karma Yoga, the chapter 2. So where leadership is an activity, it's about action. And why do you act? Why do you do it? It's about an activity of doing what? It's an activity of mobilizing ourselves and others around us for something which is societally constructive. And the moment you start doing it, you assume that you'll be successful. No. The end outcome or the output cannot guide us or inspire us. The traditional consumerist economic incentivized societies always looks at the end. It looks at what would I get after this. It's a very transactional approach. But the way I look at it, leadership is a spiritual journey. It's about mobilizing ourselves and others around us to do something societally constructive amidst enormous uncertainty. And that's exactly those are the kind of people who can survive in the kind of crisis that we are today. If you decide to mobilize yourself and others around you and decide to do something societally constructive, and that is enormously powerful. And that's what leadership is. In a very simple way, if I were to say, it's all about, it's a journey. It's a journey of understanding yourself, understanding others around you, and the actions that bind the self to the others. Now, to imagine that, why do we even imagine that I have to be a politician or a political leader to exercise leadership? I can exercise leadership in my own small circles of influence, and that's how you start. And it is so meaningful and impactful. We all get overwhelmed by the problem out there and our inability to do something about the problem that we don't even take the first step. But I believe that's a wrong approach. My approach is begin with yourself, have the courage to exercise the leadership that the situation demands, inspire people around you, and together start making the change that context in that situation, small little circle of influence demands. And that is the beginning of the journey. And if you start that way, there is no way any power on this earth can stop you from being the leader that this nation deserves.
So thank you very much. Sir, you have had the chance to write a couple of books, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, particularly with the I, the Citizen, and would you have some strong reason that inspired you to write a little bit about it? In your opinion, what are the specific alternate models that youth can actually take it up? And a little bit about your book as well. What inspired you? How did you come to write about I, the Citizen book, which is so popular around everywhere? And I have read it myself. It's a great in-depth story, very practical story, what we need to do as citizens. Can you throw a little bit more light about it, Dr. Balu?
Writing, I never really intended to write. I've actually ended up writing, my 7th book is going to come out next week. That's called Leadership Lessons for Daily Living. But I, the Citizen was by accident. I used to just write concerns that express itself as, in the preface to my book, I, the Citizen, I mentioned that I wrote to preserve my sanity. When at times when you feel that you're hitting a wall, there are times when you feel the system is crushing you, And I'm sure every young man at some point of time is going to feel, and there's no need to despair. The way for me, coping mechanism was to just write and express myself. And I said writing, and I never published it. A friend of mine suggested, why don't you just write it and publish it as a blog? And it became extremely popular. And another classmate of mine, she was a classmate at Harvard, a very well-known actor in Hollywood. I don't know if you know her name. Ashley Judd was her name. And she was so inspired by the blog. She came to me one day and said, you just can't let this be lying around in cyberspace. We got to do something about it. And so she pushed me and egged me and said, you should make it a book. And I thought, who will read my book? It's not, nobody even cares about all these things. But I was pleasantly proved wrong. And so I felt, okay, maybe, and then a lot of people convinced me that these ideas of development are counterintuitive because people believe human development is all about income growth. Now we measure development in econometric terms. It's about $1.90 or $3.20. And we're always looking at a $5 trillion economy and all this kind of consumeristic nonsense that gets filled up into the space every day, and which is completely unsustainable. That kind of an economic growth is not sustainable for this world. Today, the COVID crisis is a product of that kind of thinking, where we just simply ignore the planet. We simply ignore all the other parts of creation that are around us, and we start believing that the creation has to be human-centric, where we don't see ourselves as just one speck in the dust, a speck of dust in the whole ecosystem. And so they said, why don't you present this narrative? Why don't you just present it to the world? So what started off and then putting it together as a book emerged, and soon the book became extremely popular. And then Cornell University said this can't just be available to local audiences. They wanted to make a global edition. The global edition became extremely popular, and then the rest is history. But that being said, would I call that my favorite book? I don't know. My next book, which is a much smaller version, actually titled Voices from the Grassroots.
Yes.
I believe that most of us in India and the youth of India should wake up to this fact. We all suffer from voice poverty. We see things going wrong. We see things not working the way we want it to work. And we just tolerate mediocrity. We just tolerate nonsense. We just go on with life as though nothing happens. I think India's problem is not income poverty. Having lived with the poorest of the poor, I can tell you India's problem is we all zip the mouths. It's voice poverty. So we need to do what Vivekananda said, shake up this inertia, shake up this sleep, and then wake up and do something which is different. And that's what, and ordinary people expressing their voices in extraordinary ways is what is Voices from the Grassroots. And that's how I began to write, and soon realized that my books did have an audience. I never expected that. The Citizen got reprinted thrice. Voices from the Grassroots already got reprinted twice. And so hopefully my next book will be equally popular.
Thank you. Your books are classic by themselves, but here is Pratima Ashok from the audience. She's asking, you have written books which has inspired many, but there must be also a couple of books which inspired you. What are these? Which are these top 2 books? Pratima Ashok is asking in the audience.
I have several books that have inspired me, and I'm an avid reader. I have to read at least one book a month. And that's what gives me life. And I believe that everyone should be cognitively growing all the time. We'll have to constantly look at having the humility to learn. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says it so beautifully. He says, such a great jnani, puts it in such simple words. He says, as long as I live, so long do I learn. And I think reading is a great way of constantly expanding our intellectual bandwidth. One book, obviously it has to be Vivekananda. There's a great book by Swamiji's lectures, wherever he gave in different locations. They're called Lectures from Colombo to Almora. And it's a treat, it's an intellectual treat by itself. Another book is Swami Vivekananda's excerpts from different speeches and writings of his put together as a book. It's called Swami Vivekananda on Himself. So these are references to Swamiji that he makes about himself in different contexts. And that's an extraordinary book. But these are typically, because they are Vivekananda, it has to be that way. But I do have other books which have deeply inspired me. There's a book, many of you would have heard, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which is a great economist nudge thinking, which I subscribe to a lot. There are also Eckhart Tolle's book, Stillness Speaks, which is something which, and The New Earth, which are great, fascinating books which I keep reading and rereading all the time. So these are just a few books, but I can keep making a list of books. I love a lot of leadership books. I read a lot of Warren Bennis and Ronald Heifetz, who was my leadership teacher at Harvard, so a lot of his work. which I read. But more importantly to me, I think recently I was reading a book by another person, a good friend, but he passed away, and Hans Rosling. I know many of them might not have heard about him. A lot of his fascinating videos on YouTube, but he's written a book called Factfulness, about facts and statistics. And so it's a varied interest. So I enjoy reading different things, but mostly I love reading Vivekananda even now. Can't hear you. Krishna, I'm not hearing you. You're muted.
Sorry. So there's another question from another audience. Raveen is a Rotarian as well. She's pointing out this, you have done a lot of work in tribals, for the tribals for so many years now. He's saying nationalism is about taking care of a lot of people. It's about taking care of weaker people. But now it has all become sloganeering. It's like just slogans. On one side, you said, Krishna, we are lacking the voice, but the politicians and others have too much voice. Where are we failing? Are we not taking care of the weaker sections in the name of nationalism, or is just being slogans? Is a question that is being asked by Rotarian Raveen.
We need to really understand and dissect out the current situation. Nationalism cannot be sloganeering, and we cannot simply give legitimacy to those kind of sloganeering and then accept it as nationalism. There are two troubling trends I see now, and especially amongst young people. As part of Team Anna and fighting corruption, I realized thousands of people came on the streets waving the national flag, singing Vande Mataram and Bharat Mata Ki Jai and all that. And when I would sit with them, and I was fasting in Mysore, and I sat with them and asked them, why are you here? Why are you fasting? They said, "Illa sir, ellaru marta idru, naavu ondu ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊತ್ತು ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗೋಣ ಅಂತ ಬಂದ್ವಿ." I've had college students who would call me and say, "Sir, ನೀವು ಪ್ರಿನ್ಸಿಪಲ್ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್, ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಫ್ರೀ ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಬಂದು ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂತೀವಿ." Many of them didn't even know what are we fighting for. So what has happened is we have this exhibitionist expression of nationalism is what is catching the fancy of people. But if you really go deep down and teach our young people what nationalism is the ability to think of others beyond yourself. In one simple sentence, in a letter to the Mysore Maharaja, Swami Vivekananda writes it so beautifully. He says, "The vanities of life are transient, but he alone lives who lives for others." So we got to see nationalism from this perspective, about a life lived for others. And that doesn't mean just service. I'm not saying go to the forest, all young people to give up their dreams and go to the forest. No, dream. But when you're dreaming, dream of a life of doing good to others. I would constantly say the new economy that I talk about is, how do young people look at getting private gains along with doing public good? So they got to find that balance. It's no longer about sitting and giving up everything and serving. It's not practical. It's not going to work. We got to create a new world where we can create private gains for ourselves at the same time doing public good. And if you can do it honestly and with absolutely ethically and with the intent of actually spreading goodness around yourself, that is nationalism. Nationalism is a positive construct. I see a lot of young people burst crackers, not when India wins a match, but when Pakistan loses a match. Now, that's a problem. We think that if I say I'm very extremely proud Hindu, I can talk about this from any state. I'm a proud Hindu. It doesn't make me anti-Muslim or anti-Christian. It just makes me a good Hindu. I'm a proud Indian. I travel around the world. I'm proud to say I'm an Indian. I love this country. But that doesn't mean I hate any other country. I love Kannada. I write a lot in Kannada. But I don't hate Hindi or any other language for that matter. So I think all of us need to understand that the nationalism of the current context is a negative construct where it's always talking about hating the other. Whereas the nationalism that Vivekananda and people like us subscribe to is a nationalism which is a positive construct about loving something and doing something out of that love. And I think the greatest expression of nationalism is what you yourself pointed out, is living our lives for the others. I wouldn't call them weak or marginalized. I would just say, don't brand them as poor or anything. Just living your life for others. And that is the greatest joy you can get. And there's no greater gift to the nation than that.
It's about freedom, isn't it, sir? It's Absolutely. Really about free speech. And you're such a strong advocate of these freedom of speech and expressions. Let people speak, and then you can debate. That is your, then you can decide. Sir, we have next question. I request Shekhar Babu has a couple of questions.
Yeah.
If Shekhar can come on and he's ready to ask the question, that will be great. Shekhar?
Yeah. Dr. Balu, this is from, okay, I'll ask one question from the leadership point of view. See, if you look at our demography of our country today, 3/4 of the country are the young population. Okay. And we are in a age where technology is playing such an important role in our lives. And also the young people, especially in the urban, lot of income is there. I mean, young people going for a job in a software, okay, earning few lakhs, okay. But at the same time, if you see the other contrary of the thing, there is a huge divide between the rural and the urban population. And what is that young people can do with this type of a huge strength and energy which this country is having today, and with the technology which is available to?
You know, we all need to understand technology is not a solution for everything. But technology is a very powerful tool. And applying technology for gainful human progress is what we need to look at. You know, I keep interacting with a lot of young people, close to 100 to 150,000 young people around the world every year. And it's as though we equate the young people with Facebook, WhatsApp, and that YouTube world. And I don't think that's wrong. I feel it's very wrong, because I think what the young people need is not saying that you should not waste your time on YouTube or Facebook and all those social media things that they use, but asking them this question and changing it, saying, how can you productively use your time on those things? And it's very easy for us to pass on the responsibility, the baton of using technology for the rest of the world's good or the country's good very easily to them. And I think it's a fundamental error, because we as a generation, and I hold myself as part of that generation, I think I've failed the youth of today. Failed them in not understanding them, failed them in not inspiring them, failed them in not being role models that they deservedly should have, failed them in not being the mentors to channelize their energies in reappropriating technology for human good. And if we had done that, this question wouldn't even be coming up. I have had the pleasure of meeting with a lot of young people who find such fascinating solutions. I know of a young man in Mysore who started his own company I think just as he's graduating from engineering, whose single-minded objective was to say that the artisans in and around Mysore and their artisan handicraft should not die. How do I use my technology to make sure that happens? And he actually deployed it to connect to these artisans and connect to a market and create a global platform for that to be sold. Now, there are such wonderful young people. And I have another young person in Bangalore who's trying to use blockchain and blockchain technology to create a portal which could possibly help in fighting corruption. All that I did for these people is saying, how do you deploy technology? I just give them a social challenge. I just give them a social cause and tell them, can you see private gains in this, and design technology for that. So today, the world is severely divided. Inequities are real. There are either class inequities, caste inequities, but more importantly, in India, there are geographical inequities. People in rural areas are different, urban areas are different. And this is where the youth of today can do. I have had a young man from IIT Chennai who joined me 10 years ago, and he does such wonderful work in making sure technology is deployed through various means to ensure every rural child that we are working with has got a tab in which there are preloaded lessons which are pushed into it. And today those children are doing phenomenally well. Hundreds of children have become doctors, engineers, veterinary doctors, chartered accountants, and different things because of this kind of way he deploys technology to take education to rural India. So I think all we need to do is show them the problem and not tell them how to work out the solution. I think they're very intelligent. Respect their intelligence, give them the space, and you'll be surprised at what these young people can do. So my belief, my faith, like Vivekananda said, is the younger generation of India. I really believe that we can't simply talk about them like fashion statements, but have the courage to trust them. For God's sake, let's not tell them how to do things. I think they don't like it. What we need, and we don't know even. We will be giving them the wrong answers. We can just tell them what the problem is. And some of the young people I work with have such wonderful design thinking principles that they deploy and come up with such fascinating solutions. Some of them might be wrong. Well, we can be worse, right? So I believe the inequities, the digital inequities, is a problem that they themselves can address. Several of them are working in this direction. And I only say, if we have the courage to trust and respect the young as something more than our equals, not just as our equals, but something more than that, I think there's an enormous potential for this country. And that is the kind of leadership India needs now. A leadership which allows them to take risks, trust their enterprising qualities, trust their restlessness, trust their constructive expression of energies, and allow them to make the mistakes that we would also otherwise made.
We would have done, yes.
And things will change.
Okay.
So the courage is on one side, sir. I have a young audience here by name Shashank Hoysala. He's saying, in my age, around my age group, people undergo a lot of pressure, anxiety. How do I mean, if you were to whisper a few things to the young lads of this country, both the girls and the boys, the youth of this country, in terms of pressure, anxiety, and the challenges, how to handle this, would you have a few things that you want to say to them?
I think they need to stop and ask themselves, how did this pressure come? How does anxiety come? Am I borrowing the pressure and anxiety from my parents and from all the people around me? Or am I constructing my own world? I'm not telling young people to be a rebel or revolt and run away from their homes. All I'm saying is, for too long you've been leading a lives of being led. Have the courage to say, no, this is not what is life. I'm going to pause, I'm going to reflect. So the first quality I would like our young people to have is the spirit of reflection. How do I constantly ask questions, practice self-inquiry, ask existential questions and say, why am I anxious? Why am I nervous today? Why is this happening to me? Have the courage to look at yourself in the mirror every day and ask yourself these existential questions and then reflect on it. Because too long you've been repeating the stories that others have told you. For too long, these narratives of negativism is what has filled into your hearts. You've been told, Marat bada, bidoktya, kalmurkonte, idmad bada, atmad bada. From a young age, how many parents tell the child, doesn't matter, you break a limb, I'll have it repaired. We don't even have to, we can't even trust them with climbing a tree. We can't even trust them with crossing the street. I know there are dangers out there. I'm not saying be stupid or foolish. But can we bring them up, and I appeal this to parents before we even talk to the youth, bring them up with the confidence that the young people, repose confidence in them, tell them the narratives which are constructive and positive. If they have not, then today's young people will be nervous. So the young people have to stop, shake away this lethargy and ask themselves, why am I like this? Why can't I be different? And what is the world that they're dreaming? Are they dreaming of a world where they make a few $1 million in 2 years or start a company? I think we have given them the wrong metrics of success. ತಪ್ಪಾದ ಅಳತೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನೀವು ಪ್ರಪಂಚದಲ್ಲಿ ತೊಂದರೆ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ ತಪ್ಪು. We got to teach them the right instruments of measurement of their own lives. How do you measure success? Your life success is not measured by becoming Bill Gates at 21. Bill Gates was an accident. And today is actually real Bill Gates. He was possibly is better known around the world today for his work today than what he was 30, 40 years ago.
Exactly. I fully agree with you, sir. Yes.
Right? Society remembers him more for today than that. So our young people have to ask themselves, I only give them 2 questions. I keep telling everybody I meet. The first question is, will I be happy doing what I'm doing? If you're happy being a painter, go do it, paint. If you're happy being an electrician, do it. If you're happy just staying at home and intellectualizing some problem and trying to find a solution, do what you're happy doing. Second, the question, it can't be answered only one. You have to answer both the questions, yes. The first question is, am I happy doing what I'm doing? Second question is, am I able to spread this happiness around me? And that includes your parents, that includes your family, that includes your neighborhood, includes your friends. So you can't say, I'm happy smoking drugs or using cocaine. But that doesn't make everybody around you happy too, right? So both the answers have to be yes to it. So I think somewhere these 2 questions, if you have the courage to answer yes to these 2 questions, I think you'll have the courage to shape your life. That's all you need. You don't need any guidance. You don't need any mentoring. All you need is, it's something like they're standing in front of the mirror and they're looking at the mirror and crying that they can't see their image. The problem is the mirror is fully covered in dust. All that we have to do to tell the young people is, come on, the problem is not in you. The problem is in the dust on the mirror. Use a towel called intelligence, confidence, courage, self-belief. Wipe the dust off, see your true reflection, and then run with it. So all that parents and adults and mentors can do to young people today is give them the duster to wipe the dust off the mirror, and they can see their real image. And that is the greatness of these young people today.
Sir, thank you. The other thing is that we have a question from Bharti Singh, who has been working in, I'm sure you know her. She represents an organization called Samudra. And for 12 years, she's been working in the wellness and empowerment of youth in the society. I know her pretty well. She has a question. She's asking if you can speak a little bit about leaders' transition and the exit process of old leaders. Obviously, she has not mentioned it as old, but I would presume she means how should leaders make way for others? Probably that's what she means. If you can kindly address this, I think Bharti Singh of Samudra will be happy.
It's very simple. I think most of us seek affirmation by our presence. I think real leadership is seeking affirmation by our absence. A leader's true worth is measured when people actually miss him because he's not, they have to notice him by his absence. That is when you really exercise leadership. And leadership is not something, it's not positional. I think the problem is, I think we all hear this word succession planning. I think it's a management term, it's a management coinage where you plan for somebody else filling in your shoes. I think leadership is about constantly evolving yourself. And when you evolve and go from one level to the next, automatically somebody else is evolving and reaching your level that you occupied a few days ago. So leadership is a constantly evolving state where the roles that you play in that leadership would be very different. Now, if you take my case, for 10 years, I had laid down formal office in the Vivekananda Youth Movement 10 years ago. I stepped back, gave myself the freedom to just be myself for 10 years. But then circumstances, challenges of this year, I had to play a new role of making sure the organization continues to exist, continues to, if not grow, at least stay alive through this crisis. And hopefully next 2 to 3 years, somebody else will come in and do what they're doing. So the real strength of leadership is understanding the fact that leadership begets leadership. Only if you're not exercising leadership, you'll never be able to beget it. We think we are exercising leadership, but the real expression of leadership is when you start begetting leadership. And I can tell you, I'm proud to be associated with all the young people in the Vivekananda movement today. Such fascinating people between the ages of 25 to 30 who are doing such extraordinary things despite the crisis. Highly qualified young men and women. They could have had great lives wherever they could have been. But the spirit and the enthusiasm and energy that they beget. So I believe transitioning is a wrong word. I would rather use the word evolving. And as we evolve from one level of role that we play in any institutional construct or society to the next role, automatically if you played the leadership positions properly, somebody else will have already been evolved or you would have helped them evolve to reach into your spots. So it's not about planning for succession. It's about the organic evolution of people taking on the roles that you might have had, sharing your experience with them, transitioning into the role of being a mentor to those people, and then you have received mentorship from somebody else and evolve into something else. That can happen only when you don't feel insecure. You don't feel insecure that my job is going to be taken away by somebody else or what I am doing. Because if leadership gets its affirmation from a sense of power, then you won't let go. If leadership gets its affirmation from a sense of responsibility to society and to the communities that you serve, then it's a liberating feeling. To me, leadership with surrender will not to worry about succession because automatically somebody else will have taken your place.
Word, sir. Sir, ಇದಲ್ಲದೆ ಸ್ವಾಮಿ ವಿವೇಕಾನಂದ ಯೂತ್ ಮೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಟ್ರೈಬಲ್ ವೆಲ್ಫೇರ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳ ವರ್ಷ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿ ಯು ಆರ್ been working on that in terms of particularly for empowerment and things like that, their development and others. There are questions from Kumar who's asking what is the next level of plans that SVYM has for these young people, particularly in terms of economic development. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ತಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ಸ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಸರ್.
I'll just take a minute to explain to Kumar that what is development. Like I started explaining in the beginning, to me it's not mere income growth or economic sustenance alone. To me, development is a constant expansion of human capability. And very fact that I'm sharing some thoughts and you're asking questions, I learn from it. We are all expanding our capability by this exchange. So we are all learning all the time. We are developing all the time. It's a journey. It's never a destination. And that's what it is with tribals or with anybody else. So to me, the way development is it's a constant expansion of your human and social capital. And that will have extraordinarily powerful economic consequences. Now, development is generational. So it's taken 20, 30 years to build young people today from a child those days. Many of the children who I delivered their mothers are young people and parents of children today. So it's a journey where today we are working at their human capital has grown, their social capital has grown. Now they are ready for economic consequences. So sometimes when some of you are free, if you can come to our areas, you can see some of the girls who were, and some of them actually were delivered, their mothers were delivered by me. I've seen them from birth to what they are. These young women today are actually owners of their own food processing unit. They run their own food processing unit, make different products out of ragi. Some of them, during this COVID crisis, these women run their own garment unit. They redeployed all their energy into making masks and selling them at a nice rate. So that way, we are now believing that they're ready and ripe for the economic change. And I am focusing a lot on entrepreneurship and development, because entrepreneurship, I think, is much more constructive and paying. It brings out real leadership in every one of you to actually express yourself to your full potential. I'm not saying working for somebody is wrong or being an employee is wrong. I don't mean all that. I only say this is a better opportunity to express yourself completely, totally, and exploit your potential, if I can use that word. And that's what we're looking at young people today. So we're looking at different areas. Some of them could go into nursing, some of them go into medical field, some of them get into retail marketing, some of them are getting into garments, some of them are getting into food processing. We're hoping to start a cluster of food processing units across HT Kote. Some of the places, in other places, we're looking at different options, but I believe we have to look at economies, especially in the rural countryside, economies whose markets exist in urban areas, but which are producible in rural areas which is with low intensive technology, but at the same time, high quality product. We have chosen food processing because everybody needs to eat, and ragi is a fashion statement and fashion food. So there's a huge market which pays fashionable rates for us. ನಾನು ತಮಾಷೆ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ, ನಮ್ಮ ಟ್ರೈಬಲ್ ಹೆಂಗಸರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ನನಗೆ, ಉರಿ ಇಟ್ಟು ಏನ್ ಸರ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೇಲಿ ಮಾಡೋ ಉರಿ ಇಟ್ಟು ಇದನ್ನ ನೀವು ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಪ್ಯಾಕೆಟ್ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಇಷ್ಟು ದುಡ್ಡು ಕೊಟ್ಟು ತಗೊಂತಾರಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ದಡ್ರು ಇವರು ಅಂತ. ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಆ ದಡ್ರಿಂದಲೇ ನಡೀತಾ ಇರೋದು, ಬೈಬೇಡಿ ಅಂತೀನಿ. So that is the reality. So we have to look at what can piggyback into urban economies and how do we sustain it. The reality of India today for all the young people is most of you might be from cities. To give an example of Karnataka, Bangalore produces, it's close to the Bangalore share of the state GDP is 70%. Isn't it unfair? 1/6 the population generating, controlling, and managing 70% of the state's wealth. And that is why when COVID hits Bangalore, everybody is nervous. But there's a rest of the state too. Instead of celebrating Bangalore, I would be ashamed of the rest of Karnataka. What has our leadership done? What has our systems done for ensuring that the rest of the state only contributes 30%? So this is a challenge for all the young people watching this. Can you take this as a problem? And can you ask yourself, what can you do for rural Karnataka today, where you will inspire others in rural areas to join hands with you and bring in an enterprise which can alter the economic scenario of those rural areas?
Thank you. Shekhar, you have the next question.
Yeah. ಬಾಲು, ಒಂಥರ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗದ ಇರೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಆಲ್ಟರ್ನೇಟಿವ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತ ಒಂದು ದಿಶೆಯಲ್ಲಿ, ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ನಾವು 6th or 7th ಲಾರ್ಜೆಸ್ಟ್ ಎಕಾನಮಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಇಸ್ರೋ ಚಂದ್ರಯಾನ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಮಂಗಳಯಾನ ಇರ್ಬೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಇದೇ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಚ್ಛವಾದ ಒಂದು ಕುಡಿಯೋ ನೀರಿನ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಇದಕ್ಕಾಗ್ಲಿ ಲಕ್ಷಾಂತರ ಅಲ್ಲ ಕೋಟ್ಯಾಂತರ ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಗುಡ್ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಬೇಸಿಕ್ ಟಾಯ್ಲೆಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಒಂಥರ ತುಂಬಾ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಡಿಕ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿರೋಂತ ಒಂದು ಇದೆ. ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ನಾವು ಹೆಮ್ಮೆಯಿಂದ ಈ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅಥವಾ ಗ್ಲೋರೀಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ ಕಡೆ ಇದ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ತಲೆ ತಗ್ಸುವಂತ ಇದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಯುವರ್ ಟೇಕ್ ಆನ್ ದಿಸ್?
I think it's a product of 70 years of misunderstood human development. We cannot take away the blame from all the past leadership this country has faced. We have lost the enormous strength that civilizational India brings into the equation. We don't even I'm not a romanticist, just romanticizing about these thoughts. We haven't seen the greatness that India can offer and work with that work with the foundation of that greatness. Because I believe if you haven't learned from your history, you'll never be able, if you don't learn from the past, you'll never be able to build a great future. And what we have done is been cheap imitations of Western models, either the Russian model or the American model. I think the answer lies midway. We need to have an Indic version of human development, an Indic version of development which is fair, just, and equitable. Is it possible? I think it's absolutely possible. And some of these models have been tried around the world. Some of my own students have taken it to different countries and they become ministers of their country, and it's reasonably successful. So what exactly do I mean? What are the nuts and bolts? I think what we need to look at is creating a new economy. I call it a new economy because we need to start thinking about it. Now, we look at traditionally as a government, as a public sector, and we call it the first sector. We look at corporates and we call them the second sector, the private sector, because we always believe that they can bring in things which we need. We look at the NGO sector, and one of the words used is third sector, right? But now I'm looking at the fourth sector, a sector which takes the best DNA of these three sectors, a sector which brings in the efficiency of corporates, which brings in the social commitment and passion of NGOs, and the public obligation of the public sector. And together, it creates a hybrid version, a hybrid model, where these people, that is the model we need. And this has to be done by us in multiple ways. To give a small example, I know a lot of young people are there. How many, if I were to ask a question, each one of you, how many pairs of jeans would you own? Simple question. All of you wear jeans, I know. How many pairs of jeans would each of you own? I don't know if Shekhar would like to answer on their behalf. Or Krishna?
I can answer myself, sir.
Yes. How many pairs of jeans, Krishna?
About 10
pairs of jeans. Krishna is honest. Do we know, we talk of environment, we talk of sustainability, we talk of carbon footprint, we talk of not driving a cars, we all talk of climate change and climate justice. That's a nice new fashionable statement today. But we don't even ask us, we think all that is somewhere somebody else will do. Somebody else will stop flying the plane. Somebody else will stop using all the energy absorbing things. Simple question is, are you even aware 38% of the carbon footprint in this world comes from the fashion industry? It's the number of clothes you buy. Every pair of jeans you have bought has cost this earth 8,000 liters of water. So every time you go buy clothes, remember that it's got plastic in it. It's got some process which is water intensive. So we are constantly consuming.
A lot of water also. A lot of water.
We're constantly consuming, but we never ask this question. So we think, how can you change India? How can you change the world? Well, you can change by changing yourself. Can you tell yourself, every human being, research shows only needs 3 pairs of clothes a year. But most, on average in the world, we buy 9 to 10 pairs. Why? Because the fashion industry tells us that something is going out of fashion. At most, what can you show or what can you hide? The same body. Right? How can something be fashionable? Showing your left arm one day is fashionable, showing your right arm the other day is fashionable. But to me, if we can start, we are a consumer, we are a stakeholder, we are a shareholder, we are a son, we are a father, we are a brother. So many roles we play. In every role we play, if we can ask ourselves, how much of equity is visible in my actions? How much of planet concerns are visible in my actions? Then we have begun the change. So that is one way of ensuring change. We think change is either some man with a magic wand will occupy the prime ministership of this country, wave it and everything will change. Or we simply sit back and say, "Nan kaiyili enu madakagalla." Well, nim kaiyili sakashtu madabodu. Ishtunadru madi. Start with small things, and you'll suddenly see there's so much for everybody to share. Equity happens. So I believe what Vivekananda said, Shekhar. He said, a new India can arise not by a revolution, but only by an evolution. And evolution means every one of us. And if every one of us decide to evolve, fairness, equity, justice is the automatic consequence.
Great words, sir. Thank you. We have next year District Governor, Shri Fazal Mahmood is here. Fazal bhai, do you have a question to ask or just a few comments or something? Fazal bhai, over to you.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you, Krishna. It was great listening to Dr. Balu. Well, I'm calling him in short.
Thank you. That's what I'm called. So I'm not able to hear him. Are you?
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, now we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Sir, we need people like you in urban, not in tribal. Yes, sir. I think we need a lot of input from you. The inspiration we got in this short time, I think it is excellent. And you are talking about the hatred and all about that. Yes, we feel about position.
We lost you, Fazal.
A great.
Krishna, can you please
Hello?
repeat what you
Yeah.
say?
Sir, there's a voice break in you, Fazal bhai. आपकी आवाज में थोड़ा रुकावट है. Can you please ask again?
Yeah. Sir, don't you feel the present disposition with its narrative is disintegrating our great country with rich culture and high ethical values for the past history? So you can bring back which was there about probably 10, 15 years back when we grew as children. And what are we giving to the next generation? Are we giving them peace and harmony, or are we creating hate amongst ourselves, sir?
Krishna, can you please restate? I missed the first part of the question.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Just what he is saying is, what he's asking is, of course, the first point he made was urban, urban leadership, urban transformation is required rather than tribal. ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ probably we are losing our mental balance over a lot of issues. What he is saying is in the name of nationalism ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಇರ್ಬೋದು. Are we losing the state of peace and harmony? Do you have any advice particularly in terms of, are we fighting on things that we are not supposed to be really doing compared to a 10, 15, 20-year-old situation? That's his question.
I have a very simple, it's a great question, Fazil Ji. I think I have some very strong convictions. I have very strong convictions in the fact that truth will prevail. And it may sound very utopian or romantic, but I think these are born out of my own personal experiences. There are transitions, or they're transitioning times when things look bleak and difficult to resolve. And that has been there. And it's not just the last 5 to 10 years. I think it's been evolving over the last 30, 40 years. And but amongst all this, I see enormous goodness. I see enormous goodness in individuals. What is happening around us is, I call it political aberrations or political distractions, which has allowed the noise to prevail. I think it is voices like ours which should actually drown out the noise. There's no other way. For too long have every one of us who feel disturbed or feel upset, and it doesn't matter which side of the fence. For me, I have no differences. No, the Indian in me, or Vivekananda's guidance in me, means every human being is God. That's all. Every human being, I don't care what the outer body is or what the outer religion's dispensation that individual subscribes to, but to me, every human being is God. And I strongly believe that there will be a situation when, that's why I always say, what we need to look for is not triple bottom line even. A lot of companies ask me to guide them on how to create triple bottom line of, that's the usual planet, profits and people. I say, I will argue for a quadruple bottom line, where we need enlightened, engaged, empowered citizens to drown out the noise. And that is going to happen, but we are not going to stay quiet for too long. I think it begins with, only way it can begin is the young of this country start understanding there's a huge information asymmetry. What they think they know is not what is actually out there. They are all being fed realities which doesn't exist either way. So what they need to do is understand, go deeper and understand the real reality by reducing the asymmetry of information. And only when you reduce that, the asymmetry of power reduces. And then they start getting to understand what it is. So begin by being an enlightened citizen. Don't stop till you get to the truth. Second, then be an engaged citizen. Just because society doesn't respond, or we think we can't shift the narrative back, or we think that we can't change the voice, put our voice in, don't stop. Continue to do it, however frustrating it is. I've been beaten up, I've been arrested, but that's fun too. And then you'll end up being an empowered citizen. I think there is no shortcut. It begins with enlightenment, it continues with engagement, and it then becomes empowerment. And then a real new India will arise. We'll have to have the patience. I know it's very troubling. I know it's very disturbing, but this is a 30, 40-year build-up. And we just cannot, we reached a point where this build-up is not going to continue. This is where I think technology and the power of social media is extremely useful. And if it can be constructively deployed by the youth of this country, by youth who are sane and ask the right questions, who express leadership, I think that's the only solution, not just for India, for every country. Every country is going through this polarization. I travel around the world. I've been an advisor to countries. This is not India's problem alone. This suddenly seems to be a problem around the world, whether it's Sri Lanka, next to Sri Lanka, or if it's in Bangladesh, or it's in Pakistan, whether it's India, except Bhutan. I can keep naming every country now. It's all going through this crisis, or it is going to be, it's so-called Tibet, whether it's in exile or not in exile. Every country is going through this polarization. Leadership, people think leadership is about how to capitalize on polarization. I think leadership is all about how do we operate by not contaminating, but by collectivizing. So we have to wait to build the kind of leadership which has the courage to stop contaminating and to start collaborating and synthesizing people together. And it will happen.
Thank you, Dr. Balu. I think we're running out of time. We'll take about last couple of questions. We are beyond time already, but I think our last couple of questions that I might want to ask you. But I think there is a question from Kerala, one of our Rotarians, who's saying every single youth of this country is kind of being dragged into the politics in just about anything that they do. It's not because they want the older generation who want them to become leaders, but unnecessarily dragging politics, dragging youth into the politics, and it's disturbing even the family harmony, and it's affecting the youth leadership qualities because his mind is going somewhere else, his heart is going somewhere else. That's the kind of question we have from our Rotarian Harisha from Kerala. So if you could kindly address this briefly so that we can have another two questions and probably come to the closure. I know that people would love to listen to you, but I think beyond time. Thank you.
Rotarian Harisha, I think I'm the wrong person to be asked that. I would love every young man to be dragged into politics. But nobody is immune to politics. The moment you're born as a citizen, if you say I'm a citizen of this country, you're already political. I think we can't treat politics as a dirty word. The problem is we have been tolerating mediocre politics. We have been tolerating trashy politics. We want the young of this country to become political. And when they become truly political with the enlightenment that the politics demands, then we'll be fashioning a great country. So don't stop your children from getting into politics, but teach them politics needs to be ethical. Teach them politics is about serving the other. Teach them about politics about unifying and not separating. That is the politics we need, and I would love every young man to be there.
Thanks. We have Frank here, your college time friend, Frank Coelho from St.
Frank Coelho, is it?
Yeah, Frank Coelho.
Wow.
And he's waiting. Can we get Frank on the speaker, on the unmute mode? And if we can, Frank, do you have a question to ask, my friend?
Hi, Balu. First of all, hi, long time.
Hi, Frank.
I'm not his college mate, I'm his school mate. We spent school together. 10 long years. How are you, Balu? Doing good?
Good to see you. The same old cheerful Frank.
Same, likewise, you are too. I'm sorry I could just cover to the half of the program because I was already attending some district meeting going on. And I had a simple question. Today, as an architect, I have also turned into an entrepreneur, as a builder and as a developer, and we do a lot of construction now. But today, youth, if I look at it in a very broader perspective, the post-COVID season, we find a lot of disarrangement, disarray, and a lot of skewed out kind of youth, which is not the same as what they were post-COVID, pre-COVID. Post-COVID, there's a lot of uncertainty. What, according to you, do you see a new paradigm with the youth going forward from now, so that it could be a kind of a measure or path that we can, tell the youth?
Frank, I think I don't see COVID as a problem. Unfortunately, all of us have been presented COVID as a problem. It is a challenge. It's a health challenge. Being a doctor, being a public health expert, I know it's a huge health challenge. But I think we should present it to the youth of this country that COVID is a great opportunity. And the resolution of COVID is going to actually demonstrate how if they can capitalize on what they have, they're going to be great. Now let's look at pre-COVID. I don't agree with you, they were better off pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we trained a generation of young people by celebrating competence as something great. You get an A+, you're great. You get first rank, you're great. You crack the NET or the IIT, you're great. Right? We have defined competence as something which gives you the toolkit to survive in a highly competitive economic atmosphere. COVID has changed all that. COVID has demonstrated how incompetent we are. COVID has demonstrated how vulnerable we are. Where have we built our youth to operate in zones of incompetence? Where have we taught our youth how to be vulnerable and strong? Where have we taught our youth that in humility lies a great courage to learn? We have never taught them all that. So I believe this is a great opportunity to remedy the situation and tell the youth what does post-COVID need. Post-COVID needs an ability to deal with uncertainty. Post-COVID needs an ability to take risks. Post-COVID needs the ability to be enterprising and also failing. You can actually blame the ecosystem for your failure. And it gives you that liberty, that freedom. So if you can tell our young people, see COVID as an opportunity. See COVID as a playground where you can attempt all your games that you want to play with, all the risks that you can take. See COVID as an enormously a positive platform provided to you to try out all the modern tools to make life better. Ask them to look at COVID as a crisis born out of greed, as a crisis born out of the destruction, what we have done to Earth, our lifestyles, our living styles, eating everything that creeps on this earth or crawls on this earth, and everything that we have done. So the moment you present it to them as an opportunity to create an alternate existence, suddenly you open up the world of enterprise for them. And I think those are the young people who are going to survive. I see a lot of young people already dabbling in artificial intelligence and health and artificial intelligence and diagnosis, getting into a lot of things suddenly. I think this is the time. The ecosystem is ripe. Let's catch on to the slogans. I don't care which government is in power, but whatever government is in power, if it is Atmanirbhar, if it is Make in India, all that are great slogans to fight. The Chinese problem is a great opportunity. You can't get a better time than now to thrive and experiment. To give them the ability to experiment, and that's all you need, Frank. I think our generation taught us how to look for security. Teach our young people how to thrive amidst insecurity, and you have the answer.
Thank you very much, Frankie, for the question. Dr. Balu, maybe the last question tonight.
Thanks, Balu.
We have 20 other questions, which I will forward it to you a bit later. At least 20 questions, which cannot be answered today for various reasons, or there's no time. That's about it. We have a strange thing. Of course, this is a question, probably the last but one. We have situation. You're speaking to a lot of the young Rotaractors who are here, young Rotarians, older Rotarians, all the. You've seen Rotarians, Rotary for a very long time. Do you have some specific message for the young Rotaractors who are as a part of the Rotarian? And there's another one that's saying that I'm just trying to mix the question, should most organizations like Rotary, including other social organizations, should they have their tenure of leadership only for 1 year, just like the way Rotary has? That's a question from Unni from Rotary Bangalore Southeast. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think let's clarify, Unni, your tenure is just a position. It is not leadership. The moment you accept the Rotarian, the four things, the test of a Rotary or whatever those is, I see that board, are you this, are you that, the lovely things that you put up. The moment you accept to be a Rotarian, the real sense of the word about serving society, you already started exercising leadership. But don't confuse this with positions that you occupy in the Rotary Club. They are just positions, and that can be over in a year's time. But being a Rotarian as a leader is lifelong. So let's not get confused. I think they're two completely different things. The first part of the question, Krishna, again?
Yes. The first part of the question is, of course, do you have a specific message for Rotaractors? How are they performing in your opinion? What should they be doing?
I think don't look at Rotary as just as a club, as fellowship. There's so many other opportunities of fellowship today. I think taken questions which are more relevant. Rotary has done some path-breaking, innovative things in the past. Whether it is a pulse polio might simply seem like some program that was done in the past to the young Rotaractors, but I think pulse polio has added enormously to this country. Let's not forget it. The cost it has saved to millions of people, the poor, and to the nation is immeasurable. It will possibly produce far more wealth to this country than the cost of the program for you. So I think, ask yourself, what does this country need at this point of time? This country needs, I think, only two things. One, it needs leadership, and I believe from the youth. Second, it needs leadership for what is the next question. Leadership to refashion a new country which doesn't carry, like what Fazal was saying, all the baggage that we have created for ourselves. The leadership with the courage to change and alter the course of what India's destiny should actually be, should take us towards that destiny, and be that courageous leaders who are leaders of enterprise. I believe be leaders of social enterprises, which only Rotary can bring in. So if Rotary can bring in a mass movement of social entrepreneurs, I think your contribution to this country, and social entrepreneurs who find solutions for society's problems in a more constructive, organized, financially viable way. A society which is not going to be driven by philanthropy and charity, but a society which is going to be driven by human enterprise and innovation. If you can create that kind of young people among Rotaractors, I think they'll make Rotary Club redundant, because they'll make the whole world a fascinating moment of change.
Balu, the last question for the day, I'm sure, because still got many questions. We are very beyond, beyond the time. It's kind of favorite question comes from Ananta. I'm not sure if he's from Mysore. I know Ananta from Mysore, but he asked a question. Media trials are happening in the country, and it is producing fake leaders on one hand. It is killing the real leaders on the other. He's asking, where are we heading in terms of nation building? Are the media trials okay? What is your opinion about how do young leaders sustain this particular thing? That's the question.
It's actually
do media also need to change? That's another question.
Absolutely. Krishna, this is actually a question for you. You are the media expert, not me. But anyway, let me try to give my perspective. Let us not legitimize nonsense. Let us not for a minute give credence to trash. I don't know why this nation is so obsessed with Sushant Singh Rajput and Riya Chakrabarti. There are bigger problems for us at stake. We have bigger problems like vaccine trial. We have bigger problems. Mysore has got the highest case fatality rate. Bangalore's COVID is spreading like nobody's business. We have greater challenges to address. We have a mob which went amok in Bangalore, which cannot be allowed. We don't seem to separate law and order from religion and politics. It's a big concern of this country. So we have bigger issues to worry about. And the more we give credence and legitimacy to such discussions, the more we make them thrive. I believe in not even watching TV, not even talking about them, not even writing about them. I don't intend to waste my time. And I believe the youth of this country, Ananta, don't waste your time. Apply it to something much better. And you will see what this world needs are 8 qualities. I'm going to end here because I need to go too. So just 8 qualities what we need, Anant, and the youth of this country need it. First is, ask yourself, are you compassionate? What we need is compassion. What we need is faith and hope. What we need is spirit of service. What we need is spirit of positivism. Let's see positivism everywhere around us and stop glorifying negativism and all these constructs that we see. What we need is spirit of self-inquiry. What we need is fearlessness. And what we need is enormous mindfulness. And you have all this. Ask yourself, am I mindful of all this? There is no way you can fail. And if you can create a generation of young people with the qualities that I just described, that is real leadership. Everything else is counterfeit. Let us not even insult the word leadership by calling them leaders. They don't deserve to be given that credit or the merit. What we need is leadership. Only if you qualify in these 8 qualities can you even get close enough to call yourself a leader. And let's build a generation of young people who are exactly this. And then we won't even be talking about an India that we all will not be proud of. We'll all be extremely proud of the country we'll create. And that is my message to Rotaractors. Just live the life that you deserve to live with the courage that you can only generate, and just bring about change. The 2 questions, am I happy? Am I making people around me happy? If you answer yes to both, I think you are the leaders that India needs. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And one last video that we need to play. You had a certain message to be delivered. We'll play that video and then we'll thank you very much for being there. We'll have a formal vote of thanks. Thank you.
There are extraordinary people in this earth who normally we see them as very ordinary. Each of these people have a story to tell. Each of them have an experience which can change our lives. And a lot of my life has been influenced, changed, and evolved because of these several experiences that I had with people who lived at these grassroots, whether it's tribals, rural or urban poor. And these are captured by me as stories and anecdotes and lessons that we can all learn in Voices from the Grassroots.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ನಮ್ಮ ರೋಟರಿ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯಿಂದ ತಮಗೆ ಅನಂತ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರಗಳು. Thank you so much for making time. I know this could have gone for another 30 minutes easily. Maybe another session, another time. Thank you so much for making time and letting us know how else can we live in this world. It's not just political, it's so many ways of living life. And thank you for coming today and inspiring us. I wish you all the best in your endeavors. And thank you very much, sir. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure being with all of you today. And
Thank you, Balu.
thanks for bearing with me for the half an hour extra.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being there patiently. Thank you very much. We could not take the questions, but we will relay it to Dr. Bala. Thank you and good night, everybody. Thank you very much.